Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jassim Azzawi. The war on Iraq has torn apart the social fabric of the nation and unleashed powerful destructive forces. Ethnic and sectarian divisions have burst out into the open. Religious fanaticism has reared its head. Violence against women has become commonplace. Combine all this with increased unemployment, poverty, and dubious media coverage, and you have a destructive mix. In the past, successive Iraqi governments have sought to unify the nation and ensure social cohesion. The tough question today is, will time heal the current wounds, or will Iraqis need to rise above their differences before it's too late? James Bays reports.
The Americans call this the new Iraq, but for the poorest in society, life is harder than ever. This is Riyad Hassan, married with 8 children. He, like an estimated 50% of the population, is unemployed.
I need a job. My children are working collecting cans in the streets. They earn about $2.
This doesn't look like an oil-rich nation, once the most prosperous in the region. For years, Iraqis have been suffering hardship during the Iran-Iraq war, and then when the sanctions were imposed after Iraq invaded Kuwait. But people here say the last 5 years have been the worst. Take a look at the schools where the children study, often with no electricity and always with old, tattered textbooks. Look too at the hospitals. Doctors often lack basic equipment and the necessary drugs to treat the injured, and many health workers have been murdered or kidnapped. I'm in the only specialised heart hospital in all of Iraq. At one point they used to carry out 8 open heart operations here every single day. Yet since the US invasion, this hospital has been looted and set on fire, and many of its surgeons have fled the country. The man who ran this hospital 5 years ago is one of those no longer in Iraq. We met him in a neighbouring country.
They started to nominate popular doctors, famous doctors and scientists, right? And either kidnap them, or kill them, or delivering a letter to them, warning them that they have to leave. And that happens with me, with my colleagues, and everybody. Either being kidnapped, and then he paid the money for that, or being killed, or they leave an envelope with a letter, sometimes with a bullet.
This is a country with the second biggest oil reserves anywhere in the world. Yet here, the only way many people can afford fuel is to buy it on the black market. Iraq has abundant natural resources. It should be one of the richest countries in the Middle East. And it's not just the oil. This country used to be able to feed itself with a strong farming sector. Now, most of the fruit and vegetables you find here on sale are imported. One stallholder showed us what he had on offer.
95% of the stock I have is imported. Apples are American, mandarins are Turkish, and the bananas are from Yemen.
For the poorest, all of these are beyond reach. One woman came to the stall asking for fruit that was going off and about to be thrown away. This, she said, is all she can afford to feed her family. This is James Bays in Baghdad for Inside Iraq.
To discuss how the invasion has ripped the social fabric of Iraqi society, I'm delighted to welcome here in the studio Hadi Amr, Director of Brookings Institution, Qatar, and Iraqi economist Kamal al-Adhadh, and Iraqi internist Dr. Abdul-Haq al-Nuemi, and from London, Haifa Zangana, author of City of Widows, a powerful portrait of Iraqi women under occupation. Welcome to all of you. Haifa Zangana, let me start with you. Violence is all over Iraq. Many Western commentators, they say violence is inherent in Iraqi society. The only thing you could do with this country is divide it into 3 separate entities and get out. How do you respond to that?
Well, there is an attempt to rewrite history, the Iraqi history, and that started from the 90s by the media, by the politician, the neocon, and also by the academia themselves. So there is this attempt. It's based on the logic that Iraq has been invented as a country in the 20s of the last century, and that been invented or glued together by the British colonial powers. This is really has no basis whatsoever on the ground, but also the other rewriting of history that Iraqi themselves as a nation are violent. So each Iraqi carries within himself or herself the violence which been inherited across generations. The first logic of it, which is Iraq has been glued, and the only way to end the violence nowadays is to unglue the country. This is really a complete nonsense, because Iraq has existed from time immemorial. It hasn't been invented by the colonial powers in the 20s. Iraq has been mentioned thousands of years before Christianity. The first word of the word Iraq as it is, it's been discovered in a Quiche document 1200 years before Christianity, and it's continued to be like that. Iraqis carries the continuity of civilization, of history, of identity. But also nowadays they carry the modern identity, which could be this, I mean, the British, what they did is they established the state of Iraq, the modern state of Iraq, that they did not invent or glue the country or the nation as such.
Having heard Haifa what just said, still the obvious thing is there is rivalry, there is sectarian and ethno-sectarian fightings. There is, for the first time in Iraqi history, we hear about Shi'is and Sunnis, and yet the elements, the people who are doing this are Iraqis. It's true, the invasion and the occupation has unleashed these forces. Can you ever put it back again?
I think we can. The bottom line in Iraq is that Iraq, the post-9/11 history of Iraq, the post-Saddam history of Iraq, has been a tragedy created by the American invasion, where we have tens or hundreds of thousands of Iraqis who have died, that on a per capita equivalent is hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans who have died. We've had the economy in a disaster area. And I think human beings, whenever they're put under tremendous pressure, tend to infight and blame each other. We see this in the Gaza Strip with Fatah and Hamas fighting. It's because of the intense poverty and the occupation there. And so I think it's a natural human response to adversity, to pain, to difficulty, that there's infighting. And I think if we can get out of the period of pain, that Iraq can put itself back together again.
Dr. Kamal, to what extent poverty and the lack of money and the lack of jobs is contributing to this social upheaval in Iraq?
A great deal. I think I do not condone the idea that Iraqis by nature are violent and biased, and sectarian antagonism is well ingrained in them. No, I don't believe in that. I think these factors have been unleashed by other factors, by the occupation, by some political elites which are deploying sectarian antagonism for their own.
Is this willingly or by ignorance?
No, it's both. You see, first of all, there are certain historical roots to whatever we are finding today. You see, in our society, the Iraqis lived for centuries. Though there have been some differences, religious differences, or sectarian differences, these differences were not rarely violent. They were actually they have some sort of self-adjusting consolation. The section that believes that they are right, they don't want to violently get rid of the other, but they think that God will select them for paradise.
Before I go to Dr. al-Nuemi, Haifa Zangana, when I asked Dr. Kamal Al-Adhadh whether the utilization of certain terminologies and sectarianism aspect, whether it's by design or by default or by ignorance, he said it's both. How do you explain to viewers who are non-Iraqis and perhaps non-Muslims, certain Iraqi politicians, they started using terminologies like al-Nawasib, like al-Rawafid, like, you know, we have a Shi'i agenda, we have a Sunni agenda, we have to do this, and now we are talking about al-Muhasasa, the sectarian quota. Was that by design or by ignorance?
No, I think it has been designed for a long time before it happened inside Iraq. But even inside Iraq, I mean, until now, we have to look and see it in general. And if we look at the all opinion polls, Iraqis in general, they talk about their unity, about their national unity, about Islam in general. They hardly mention the sectarian divide. This is a language between almost characteristic of the politicians who came with the invasion to Iraq, and they are building their bases based, I mean, their power, and also they're trying to root themselves within Iraqi society based on sectarianism.
So this is a pure mischief for ulterior political...
It is. I mean, if you, Jassim, if you allow me, if you look at the newspapers, and which we follow all,
I promise you I will I'll come to that immediately
okay.
after the break. But let me include Dr. al-Nuemi, who was a lecturer at Mosul University. He's an internist. To what extent this social fabric is affecting Iraqi educational system, specifically the medical field?
Well, to high extent, in fact, because you see the education in Iraq is affected 2 decades before US invasion. And this is another burden, I mean the invasion. Well, the higher education need support, support from the government to raise good candidates for this essential field. Well, Iraqi doctors, thousands have fled the country since the invasion. And even the others who are inside Iraq are threatened. So we hope that the improvement of the environment...
After all that, Dr. al-Nuemi, you are still hopeful. That's a very good thought. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with our guests. Stay with us.